My name is Clara Mayfield. For 40 years, I was a university archivist, a keeper of records and histories, a woman who believed in the quiet, orderly power of a well-documented truth. I spent my life protecting stories, never imagining my own would end with a chapter so full of deceit it defied all reason. I always believed that a mother's love was the purest form of self-sacrifice. I learned, on the cold, sterile floor of a hospital preoperative bay, that the purest love can be used as a weapon, and the greatest sacrifice can be the final move in a game you never knew you were playing. I was scrubbed, prepped, and minutes away from having a surgeon remove my kidney, the ultimate gift of life for my dying son, Julian. I was at peace, ready to make the sacrifice. That peace was shattered when the doors burst open and my 9-year-old grandson, Noah, ran in, his face pale with terror, and shouted the words that would stop my heart and save my life. "Grandma, don't do this! My dad has been poisoned." In that moment, I understood that the sickness that was killing my son was not in his body, but in his marriage, and the woman I called my daughter-in-law was not trying to save his life, but to orchestrate its end. Before the storm that was Serena, my life was a quiet, well-ordered archive. My husband, Henry, a brilliant classics professor, had passed away years ago, leaving me as the sole guardian of our small, precious collection. Our son, Julian, and the beautiful craftsman home in a quiet university town in Northern California we had filled with books, music, and love. After I retired from my position as head archivist at the university, my days fell into a comfortable rhythm, dictated by the needs of my family and the quiet pursuits I cherished. Our home was nestled on a street shaded by ancient oak trees, a place of profound peace. It was a house of light and learning, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable reading chairs, and a garden where I grew heirloom roses. It was my sanctuary. My world revolved around two hearts, my son, Julian, and my grandson, Noah. Julian was a literature professor at the same college where his father had taught, a man who had inherited Henry's intellect and gentle, contemplative nature. He was a wonderful father, but I sometimes feared a man too lost in the grand narratives of fiction to see the subtle, dangerous subtext of reality. After his divorce a few years prior, he and young Noah had come to live with me. It was a temporary arrangement that had, to my quiet delight, become permanent. Noah, my grandson, was the bright, vibrant bookmark in the quiet pages of my life. At 9 years old, he was a bundle of boundless energy and startlingly insightful questions. He had my late husband's curious eyes and my son's kind heart. The three of us had formed our own little constellation, a small but steady light in the vastness of the universe. I would help Noah with his school projects at the big oak table where Henry had once graded papers, and Julian would join us for dinner, our conversations a comfortable mix of schoolyard adventures and literary debates. Our life was not exciting, but it was rich, stable, and filled with a deep, abiding love. I believed it was unshakable. Julian met Serena at a university fundraiser. He came home that night with a look on his face I had not seen in years, a look of pure, unadulterated wonder. He spoke of her as if she were a living work of art. She was a high-end real estate developer, he said, one of the most successful in the Bay Area, specializing in luxury properties. She was brilliant, he gushed, and beautiful, and she understood his passion for literature in a way no one else ever had. When I finally met her, I understood his captivation. Serena was a study in flawless elegance. She was tall and slender, with dark, intelligent eyes and a smile that could disarm armies. She did not just enter a room, she took possession of it, her confidence a tangible force. She arrived at our home for dinner, not with a simple bottle of wine, but with a rare leather-bound copy of Julian's favorite classic novel. "Clara," she said, taking my hand in both of hers, her grip firm and warm. "It is a true honor. Julian speaks of you with such love and reverence. I can see now where he gets his wonderful character." Her flattery was so smooth, so expertly applied, that it was almost impossible to resist. She was magnificent with Noah, listening to his long, rambling stories about his video game creations with the focused intensity of a scholar. She engaged Julian in a lively debate about the merits of modernism, her knowledge as deep and nuanced as his own. She presented herself as his perfect intellectual and emotional equal. I watched her that night, a dazzling star that made our quiet constellation seem suddenly dim. There was a perfection to her, a polished, practiced quality to every word and gesture that felt unnatural. It was like watching a flawless theatrical performance. I told myself I was being cynical, a lonely old woman unwilling to share her son's heart. I chose to believe in the beautiful facade she presented, and I ignored the faint cracks I could almost see in the polish. They married 6 months later in a chic, minimalist ceremony at a modern art gallery. Serena moved into our home, and with her, a new, more glamorous energy. She was, by all appearances, the perfect wife and daughter in law. She was kind and attentive to me, a loving stepmother to Noah, and a passionate, supportive partner to Julian. She seamlessly wove herself into the fabric of our lives. It was about a year into their marriage that the illness began. It started with a weariness in Julian that he could not shake, a deep cellular exhaustion that left him pale and drawn. Then came the other symptoms, a slow, creeping invasion, persistent nausea, a strange swelling in his hands and feet, a shortness of breath. The doctors were mystified. Julian, who had always been the picture of health, was suddenly a medical puzzle. They ran batteries of tests, from blood panels to biopsies, but the results were inconclusive. His health continued to decline at an alarming rate. He had to take a leave of absence from the college. His days reduced to a slow, tired shuffle between his bed and the living room sofa. Serena was a rock. She transformed into the most capable, devoted caregiver imaginable. She researched specialists, scheduled every appointment, and managed his complex and ever-changing regimen of medications. She cooked him special, nutrient-rich meals and sat by his side for hours, reading to him as he drifted in and out of a weary sleep. Her strength was awe-inspiring. We, as a family, leaned on her completely. She was our commander in the field, leading the fight against an enemy we could not see. The gratitude I felt for her was immense, and it silenced the last lingering whispers of my initial unease. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was a devastating blow. Aggressive, idiopathic kidney failure. For reasons no doctor could explain, both of his kidneys were shutting down at a catastrophic rate. The nephrologist was blunt. Without a transplant, Julian had, at most, 6 months to live. The world stopped. The news was a physical blow, a thief that stole the very air from my lungs. But amidst the terror and the frantic search for a donor, there was a single, piercing ray of hope. I was a perfect match. The relief that washed over me was a tidal wave, so powerful it left me weak-kneed. I would not lose my son. I had the power to save him. The risks of the surgery, the long recovery, none of it mattered. To give Julian my kidney was not a decision. It was a biological and emotional imperative. The surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks out, the soonest the hospital could arrange it. In the midst of this medical crisis, Serena's efficiency went into overdrive. She became the absolute administrator of our lives. Clara, you need to focus on one thing and one thing only: staying healthy for the surgery, she said, her voice firm but full of a deep, convincing tenderness. And Julian needs to focus on resting. You cannot be burdened with finances or household stress right now. It is simply too much. Let me take care of everything. It was an offer I could not refuse. I was consumed with medical appointments, with the fear of the upcoming surgery, and with the profound, aching grief of watching my son wither. The thought of balancing a checkbook or paying a bill felt like an impossible weight. Gratefully, tearfully, I surrendered control. I gave her the keys to my entire life, access to my bank accounts, my retirement portfolio, my insurance documents. I did it without a moment's hesitation. She was not just my daughter-in-law. She was our savior, the strong, capable woman who was holding our broken family together. A few weeks before the surgery, Serena came to me with a stack of legal documents. She had a lawyer with her, a sleek, polished man who smiled but whose eyes were cold. "Clara," she began, her tone gentle and somber, "this is just some standard legal housekeeping. With your surgery coming up and Julian's uncertain future, our lawyer insists it is crucial that we protect the family's assets. It is about protecting Noah." Noah. He was the magic word, the key that could unlock any door. She explained the documents. It was a durable power of attorney, she said, which would allow her to make financial and medical decisions for me while I was incapacitated from the surgery. And there was another, more complex document, one that would place my house and other major assets into a newly created family trust, with her and Julian as the trustees. It is just a formality, she said smoothly, anticipating my hesitation. It is the modern way to manage an estate. It protects the house from taxes and creditors. It ensures that everything will pass seamlessly to Noah one day. It is the most responsible thing we can do for him. Julian was there, looking frail and sallow in his armchair. It makes sense, Mom, he said, his voice weak. Serena is just trying to take care of everything. Please do not worry. My mind, what was left of it amidst the storm of fear and grief, screamed a faint warning. This was too much, too fast. But how could I object? How could I question the motives of the woman who was so selflessly caring for my dying son? How could I refuse to sign a document that was supposedly for the protection of my grandson? To do so would have seemed monstrous, selfish. So I picked up the pen. My signature, once the mark of a competent and independent woman, felt like a testament to my own weakness. I signed away my home. I signed away my savings. I signed away my right to make my own decisions. I did it because I believed it was a necessary sacrifice, a small price to pay for the life of my son. In the final days before the surgery, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Serena's control became absolute. She began to treat me less like a mother-in-law and more like a fragile, slightly incompetent patient. My diet was monitored, my activities were managed. She developed a special restorative herbal tea that she insisted I drink every evening. It will build up your strength for the surgery, she would say, her smile never wavering. The tea had a strange, bitter aftertaste, but I drank it dutifully, wanting to believe in her care. The isolation, which had begun subtly, was now overt. When my sister called from out of state to wish me well, Serena answered my phone. She is resting, Carol, I heard her say. The doctors have insisted on absolute quiet to keep her stress levels down. But I will be sure to give her your love. She never did. Noah, my grandson, was my only window to the truth, though I did not see it at the time. He had grown quiet and withdrawn. One evening, he came into my room, his face pale and troubled. Grandma, he whispered, closing the door behind him. I do not like Mommy Serena's tea she gives Daddy. Why is that, my love? I asked, stroking his hair. It smells funny, he said. And after he drinks it, he gets sleepy and his tummy hurts. He told me not to tell her. He then added a line that would come back to haunt me. And she told me never ever to drink anything she makes for him or for you, because it is special adult medicine. A cold, sharp alarm bell went off in the deepest part of my mind. But I silenced it. I was in a state of heightened emotional distress. I was facing major surgery. I told myself it was just a child's overactive imagination, that Serena was just being cautious. To believe anything else was to open a door to a darkness so profound I could not bear to face it. So I chose not to see. I chose to trust. I walked into that hospital, ready to give a piece of myself to save my son, completely unaware that the woman smiling and holding my hand in the hallway was not just taking my kidney. She was taking everything. The days following my agreement to donate my kidney were a strange, disorienting blur. The world outside continued on its axis, but my own had shrunk to the confines of this house, a place that was rapidly becoming a gilded cage. Serena's control, which had once been a subtle, creeping vine, now grew with suffocating speed, entwining itself around every aspect of our lives. Her care for me became a form of house arrest. Clara, you must not overexert yourself, she would say, her voice a silken trap of concern as she intercepted me on my way to the garden. The doctors were very clear. You need to build your strength. Let me have the gardener handle the roses for now. My daily walks were curtailed. My diet was strictly managed by her. And my social life was effectively terminated. Friends who called were met with Serena's polished, regretful voice on the phone. Clara is under strict doctor's orders to rest. She is so fragile right now. We are monitoring her constantly. She was not just isolating me, she was actively curating a narrative of my frailty to the outside world, laying the groundwork for whatever was to come next. The strange, bitter tea continued to be a non-negotiable part of our evening ritual. Both Julian and I were to drink it. An ancient recipe for strength and purification, she would say with a serene smile. I noticed that after drinking it, a profound lethargy would settle over me, a weariness that went bone deep. My mind felt foggy, my thoughts slow and difficult to grasp. Serena would attribute this to pre-surgery anxiety, a diagnosis she delivered with the confident authority of a physician. Julian, in his weakened state, seemed to sink even deeper into a hazy stupor after his nightly cup, his illness appearing to accelerate before my very eyes. The next phase of Serena's plan was unveiled with the same cold, strategic brilliance she applied to everything. She called a family meeting in the living room, a room I barely recognized anymore with its cold, minimalist furniture and stark, empty walls. She had a presentation ready on her tablet, complete with spreadsheets and ominous-looking financial projections. I have had a series of long, difficult conversations with the insurance company and the hospital's billing department. She began, her face a mask of grave sorrow. I'm afraid the news is not good. While the policy covers the basics of the transplant, it does not cover the extensive post-operative care Julian will need. We are looking at experimental therapies, round-the-clock nursing, and medications that are astronomically expensive. She swiped the screen, showing us a budget filled with terrifyingly large numbers, a mountain of debt that she claimed was unavoidable. We have some savings, she continued, but they will be exhausted within months. We are facing a financial catastrophe. Julian, looking gaunt and pale in his armchair, stared at the numbers with a look of utter despair. What are we going to do? He whispered, his voice weak. Serena let the silence hang in the air for a moment before delivering the solution she had intended all along. She reached over and placed her hand on my knee, her touch meant to convey sympathy, but feeling only like the closing of a trap. Clara, she said, her voice soft and full of a terrible, false empathy. I know how much this house means to you. I know it is your entire life's history. But the equity you and Henry built over the years, it is the only thing that can save him. We have to sell the house. The words struck me with a physical force. Sell my home. The place Henry and I had filled with love and laughter. The place I had raised my son. It was the last tangible piece of my husband I had left. No, I said, the word a raw, instinctive rejection. There must be another way. Serena's eyes filled with tears, a masterful performance of a wife's desperation. There is no other way, she cried, her voice breaking. Clara, please, I am begging you. Do you not understand? This is to save your son's life. Is this house, these walls, more important to you than Julian? It was the perfect, cruel checkmate. She was framing my love for my home as a lack of love for my son. Julian looked at me, his eyes pleading, his face a mask of shame and fear. She is right, Mom, he croaked. It is just a house. We have to do it. We have to do whatever it takes. I was being asked to sacrifice my past and my future on the same altar, and with my son's life hanging in the balance, it was a choice I could not refuse. My power of attorney, the document I had so foolishly signed, meant that legally, she could likely force the sale anyway. My agreement was just a formality, a final, humiliating twist of the knife. I nodded, a slow, painful surrender, unable to speak past the lump of grief in my throat. My capitulation on selling the house seemed to make Serena even more confident, and that confidence made her careless. The first piece of hard evidence, the first thread I could pull to begin unraveling her web of lies, I found by accident. I was searching for an old photo album in the back of a closet in Julian's study, a room Serena had long since commandeered as her own office. My hand brushed against a leather briefcase I did not recognize, tucked away behind a box of old books. A strange, primal curiosity I had not felt in months took over. My hands shaking, I opened it. Inside was not the jumble of papers I expected, but a series of neat, meticulously organized files. And they were not about our family. Each file was labeled with a different surname. The Patterson Estate, the Miller Trust, the Chen account. Inside each were copies of death certificates, autopsy reports, and complex financial statements that showed vast sums of money being transferred into a single holding company after the date of death. The causes of death were all different: a heart attack, a stroke, a tragic accident. But the pattern was the same: an elderly, wealthy individual, a new, much younger wife or caregiver, and a swift, total transfer of assets upon their death. My blood ran cold. This was not the portfolio of a successful real estate developer. This was the work of a predator, but it was the file at the very bottom that stopped my breath. It was a new file, and it was labeled the Vance Mayfield Estate. Inside, I didn't find our financial papers. I found a single, newly issued document. It was a life insurance policy, one I had never seen before, for $5 million. It had been taken out 2 months ago, and the sole beneficiary was Serena. The insured party was not me. It was Julian. The world swam before my eyes. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening logic. Julian's mysterious illness, Serena's insistence on managing his every medication and meal, her pushing for me to have a major, debilitating surgery, her need to sell the house to liquidate our primary asset, and now, this. She was not trying to save my son. She was trying to bankrupt him and then kill him. My kidney donation was not an act of life-saving grace. It was a distraction, a way to get me, the protective mother, onto an operating table and out of the way, leaving Julian completely vulnerable to her final move. The knowledge was a fire in my blood, burning away the fog of confusion and despair. The doubt was gone, replaced by a terrifying certainty. But what could I do? I was a prisoner, my every move monitored. If I confronted her, she would deny everything and simply accelerate her plans. I had to be smarter. I had to be colder. I had to become a predator myself. My first act of rebellion was to stop drinking the tea. I would pretend to sip it, then pour it down the bathroom sink when no one was looking. Within 2 days, the fog in my mind began to clear. My energy, which had been so depleted, began to return in a slow, steady trickle. My next move was to seek outside help. But how? My phone calls were monitored. I could not leave the house alone. I used the persona she had created for me. I began to talk about my late husband, Henry, more often, feigning a slide into sentimental dementia. I spoke of our old lawyer, a man named Mr. Abernathy, who had retired years ago and moved to a different state. I need to speak to Mr. Abernathy, I would insist to Serena, my voice a childish whine. He is the only one who understands Henry's papers. It was the perfect ruse. Serena, seeing it as further proof of my mental decline, eventually relented, thinking a call to a long-gone lawyer was a harmless delusion. "Of course, Clara," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I will dial his old office number for you." But I had not given her the real number. I had given her the number for a burner phone I had purchased in cash years ago for international travel. And the person who answered was not a retired lawyer. It was my sister, Carol. In a few whispered, frantic sentences, I told her I was in terrible danger, that I needed a lawyer, a real one, and that no one could know. While my sister began a frantic, secret search for legal help on my behalf, my life in the house became an unbearable torment. The "for sale" sign was hammered into our front lawn on a bleak, rainy afternoon. Sunday, September 28th, 2025. I will never forget that date. It felt like a tombstone for the life Henry and I had built. Potential buyers began to parade through our home, their polite murmurs a funeral dirge for my memories. I was forced to pack my life into boxes, each photo album, each piece of art, a fresh wave of grief. The surgery was now just 10 days away. The date loomed not as a beacon of hope, but as a deadline for my own destruction. I knew I was walking into a trap, but I could not see a way out. If I refused the surgery, Julian would die. If I went through with it, I would be left weak and incapacitated, and he would still be at Serena's mercy. My final, desperate attempt was to appeal to my son. I found a rare moment when Serena was out of the house, and I went to him, my heart a raw, open wound. I knelt by his bed, my hands clutching his. "Julian," I pleaded, my voice breaking, "she is lying to you. She is not who you think she is. She is going to destroy us. You have to believe me." He looked at me, his eyes clouded with sickness and the sedative effects of Serena's care. There was no recognition, no spark of the intelligent, loving son I knew. There was only a weary, profound disappointment. "Mom," he said, his voice a tired sigh. "Please, stop this. Serena is doing everything for us. She loves me. You are not well. The stress, it is making you paranoid. You need to rest. You are tearing this family apart." That was the moment my hope died. To be looked at with such pity, such dismissiveness. By my own child, it was a betrayal deeper and more painful than any theft of money or property. He was lost to me, a willing captive in his own execution. I walked out of his room, the door closing on the last vestiges of the mother I used to be. I was utterly alone, discredited by my friends, disbelieved by my son, and trapped in a house with a woman who was planning to kill us both. The weight of it all was crushing, and for the first time, I felt the cold, seductive pull of surrender. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a crazy old woman. Maybe it was better to just close my eyes and let the darkness take me. I was adrift in a gray, silent ocean of despair. The days leading up to the surgery were a slow, monotonous march toward a fate I felt powerless to prevent. I had been defeated. My son did not believe me, my friends thought I was unstable, and my home was no longer my own. I had retreated into myself, into a quiet, hollow place where Serena's lies could not hurt me, but neither could the truth. I was contemplating the ultimate surrender, simply letting it all happen. The voice that pulled me back from the abyss was the smallest and most important one in my world. It was Noah. He came into my room late one night, a small, silent shadow in the darkness. I had thought he was asleep. He crept to my bedside and tugged on the sleeve of my nightgown. "Grandma?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Are you awake?" "I am, my love," I said, my voice thick with a weariness that felt ancient. "What is it?" "I heard Daddy crying," he said, his little body shaking with a child's profound and helpless empathy. "After you left his room today, he was talking to himself. He said he was too tired to fight Mommy Serena anymore." He looked up at me, his eyes huge and dark in the dim light, and he asked the question that saved my life. "Is she going to make him go away like my other mommy?" The words were a lightning strike to my soul. My own pain, my own defeat, had blinded me to the real stakes. This was not just about my life, my home, my sanity. It was about this little boy. Serena had already stolen his mother's memory. Now she was stealing his father's will to live, and soon she would steal his life. And after that, she would have Leo, a wealthy orphan, completely under her control, to mold and manipulate as she saw fit. The image of Noah, alone in the world with that monster, was a terrifying inferno that burned away all my despair, all my surrender. The lethargy that had held me captive was replaced by a surge of pure, cold, and ferocious adrenaline. My grief for the son I was losing transformed into a primal, grandmotherly rage to protect the boy who was left. The fight was not over. It had just begun. The next morning, I began to fight back, using the only weapons I had left: cunning and the persona of a defeated woman. I knew I needed help, an ally on the outside, and my only lifeline was my sister, Carol. But I could not simply call her. Serena monitored my phone. I used the one thing Serena could not control: the mail. I wrote a long, detailed letter to Carol, laying out everything I had discovered in the briefcase, my suspicions about the tea and the life insurance policy. I described Serena's control and my complete isolation. I ended with a desperate plea for her to find me the best, most discreet probate litigation lawyer in San Francisco, and to create a secret way for us to communicate. Getting the letter out of the house was a challenge. I could not put it in our own mailbox. Serena checked it every day. I had to wait. My opportunity came 3 days later, when the gardener was working in the front yard. While Serena was on a long conference call in her office, I shuffled out to the garden, pretending to inspect my wilting roses. I intercepted the gardener as he was leaving, pressing the sealed, stamped envelope into his hand along with a $20 bill. "Could you do me a great favor, Carlos?" I whispered, my eyes darting toward the house. "My daughter-in-law worries so much about my memory. She doesn't like me to handle the mail. But this is a birthday card for my sister, and I am so afraid it will be late. Could you please drop it in a public mailbox for me? It will be our little secret." He saw the desperation in my eyes, nodded, and slipped the letter into his pocket. It was a terrible risk, but it was the only one I had. For the next few days, I lived on a knife's edge of hope and fear, waiting for a signal. The signal came the following Saturday. A small, anonymous package arrived, addressed to the Mayfield residence. It contained a new, beautiful digital photo frame. Serena, assuming it was a gift from one of her clients, was delighted. "How thoughtful," she said, but I knew it was from Carol. Taped to the inside of the packaging was a tiny note, written in my sister's hand. "New lawyer is David Chen. He will call the landline tomorrow at 3 p.m. sharp and identify himself as Mr. from the University Alumni Association. Be ready." The next day, I hovered near the phone, my heart pounding. At exactly 3 p.m., it rang. I snatched it up before Serena could. "Hello?" "Hello, I am calling for Clara Mayfield from the University Alumni Association," a calm, professional voice said. "This is she," I replied, my hands trembling. "Excellent," the voice said. "I am just calling to confirm your contact details for our records. I have a new secure email address for you here. It is..." He proceeded to read out a complex email address and a password that was a combination of my mother's name and my childhood street address, information only my sister would know. He told me to log on that evening, that he would be waiting. That night, I used an old, forgotten tablet computer I kept in my room. The new email account was already set up. A video call request was waiting. I put in my earbuds and accepted the call. The face that appeared on the screen was that of a sharp, intelligent man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor. David Chen. My sister was on the call as well. I told him everything. For the second time, I laid out the whole sordid story. But this time, I had more details. I told him about the briefcase, the pattern of deaths, the life insurance policy, and Noah's fears about the bitter tea. Mr. Chen listened, his expression unreadable. He was pragmatic and direct. Clara, he said when I had finished, your story is compelling, but it is also the textbook definition of what a defense attorney would call delusional paranoia in an elderly, grieving woman. Right now, we have nothing but your word and a child's testimony about bad-tasting tea. We need irrefutable proof of intent. We need to catch her in the act. He laid out the strategy. It was dangerous. It required me to go from a passive victim to an active operative. First, he said, you must not, under any circumstances, refuse the surgery. That would make her panic, and we have no idea what she would do. We must let her believe her plan is proceeding perfectly. Second, he continued, you will continue to play the part of the defeated, confused woman she believes you to be. Your weakness is your cover. We need her to be arrogant and careless. And third, he concluded, we are going to turn that house into a surveillance operation. My sister is sending you another package. It will contain the tools you need to gather the evidence that will save your life. The next package arrived a few days later. This one contained a beautiful modern digital photo frame. It was a gift from Carol, or so I told Serena. My sister is so sweet, I said with a weak smile. She thought some new family pictures might cheer me up. Serena, delighted by any object that further erased the house's past, insisted on placing it on the desk in her home office, a perfect vantage point to see and hear everything that happened there. The frame was, of course, a high-definition camera and audio recorder, controllable remotely by Mr. Chen's team. My performance became my sole focus. I leaned into the role of the frail, fading matriarch. I would forget conversations we had just had. I would shuffle my feet. Most importantly, I began to talk about the upcoming surgery with a kind of serene, fatalistic acceptance. I am not afraid, I told them one evening, my voice full of a false peace. To give my life so that my son can live. It is a mother's greatest gift. I am ready. The effect on Serena and Julian was profound. They were relieved. They believed my spirit was finally and truly broken, that I had accepted my fate. Serena's vigilance relaxed. She became bolder, more open in her conversations, convinced that the confused old woman in the next room was no longer a threat. She did not realize the Trojan horse was already inside her gates, and it was watching her every move. The evidence we gathered was more damning than I could have ever imagined. The digital frame became my silent, secret ally, recording the slow, methodical process of my own destruction. We recorded Serena's phone calls, her voice stripped of its usual warmth, now cold and clinical, as she spoke with bankers about liquidating my assets the moment the power of attorney was activated by my incapacitation after the surgery. We watched her forge my signature on financial documents. The most chilling evidence, however, was about the tea. We recorded her talking to someone on a secure line, a man who was clearly her accomplice. The dosage of the aconite needs to be consistent, she said, her voice a low murmur. It is mimicking the symptoms of renal failure perfectly. The doctors are baffled. After the transplant, we will increase the dosage. His new kidney will fail within a month, and everyone will blame it on organ rejection. It is the perfect, tragic ending to the story. Aconite, a poison derived from the wolfsbane plant, a beautiful but deadly flower I knew well from my botany work. It was a potent, fast-acting cardiotoxin. The bitter tea was not just keeping Julian weak. It was a slow-acting murder weapon, and the transplant was not about saving him. It was about providing a cover story for his death. Each new piece of evidence was a fresh wave of horror, but it was also a confirmation. I was not crazy. I was a witness. My son was being murdered in front of my eyes, and I was the only one who knew the truth. The surgery was now just days away. The date was set. Sunday, September 28th, 2025. The date, once a beacon of hope, was now a ticking time bomb. Mr. Chen had everything. He had proof of financial fraud, conspiracy, and, with the recording about the aconite, he had proof of attempted murder. He had already taken it to a trusted contact at the district attorney's office. They were building a case. They will not act yet, he told me on our last secret video call. They want to catch her in the act. They want the accomplice. They want to know where she's getting the poison. They want the whole conspiracy. They are going to let you go to the hospital. The fear was a cold, constant presence. I had to walk into that hospital. I had to let them prep me for surgery. I had to put my life and my son's into the hands of a plan that could go wrong at any moment. The night before the surgery, Serena came into my room. She held my hand, her eyes full of a perfect false sympathy. "You are so brave, Clara," she whispered. "Henry would be so proud of you. Tomorrow you will save our family." I looked into the eyes of the woman who had been slowly poisoning my son and who was planning his death, and I smiled my weak, vacant smile. "I know, my dear," I said. "It is all for Julian." I spent that night packing my small hospital bag, my mind racing. I was not just packing my nightgown and my toothbrush. I was packing away the woman I had once been, the trusting mother, the quiet archivist. Tomorrow, I would walk into the lion's den. I did not know if I would walk out again, but I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I would not let her win. 5 Likokam, 7 Tokagam, September 28th, 2025. The morning of the surgery arrived, not with a dawn of hope, but with a gray, chilling sense of finality. I had not slept. I had spent the night sitting in the dark, watching the hours tick by, each one a step closer to an unknown precipice. The house was unnaturally quiet, holding its breath. I dressed in the simple, comfortable clothes Serena had laid out for me, feeling like a soldier putting on a uniform for a battle I might not survive. My movements were slow and deliberate, a stark contrast to the frantic, silent screaming in my own mind. My only contact with the outside world, with the allies I could not see, was a brief coded text exchange with my sister Carol on the burner phone. "The sun is rising. I am ready." I typed, my thumb clumsy on the tiny screen. Her reply came a moment later. It was late evening on the East Coast where she lived, a small detail that made me feel even more disconnected from the normal world. "The lawyer is with the team. They are in place. Be brave. We are with you. Be brave." The words seemed impossibly distant. The drive to the hospital was a study in surreal tension. Serena drove, her demeanor a perfect blend of wifely anxiety and daughterly concern. She would occasionally reach back to squeeze my hand, her touch cold as a snake's skin. "Everything will be all right, Clara," she said, her voice a smooth, practiced balm of reassurance. "The doctors are the best. You are giving Julian the most incredible gift. You are a hero." I looked out the window at the familiar Northern California landscape, the golden hills still shrouded in the morning mist, and I felt a profound sense of detachment. She was talking about my heroism while actively plotting the murder of my son. The sheer, monstrous audacity of it was breathtaking. Julian sat in the back, silent and frail, wrapped in a blanket, his head resting against the cool glass of the window. He was too weak to speak much, a passive passenger being ferried to the next stage of his own execution. I looked at his reflection in the window, at the son I loved so dearly, and I gathered my strength. I was not a hero. I was a mother about to walk into a fire to save her child. 7:45 a.m. The hospital was a world of sterile white and hushed, urgent efficiency. I was separated from Julian and taken to a pre-operative bay, a small curtained cubicle that immediately became my cell. A kind professional nurse began the process of preparing me, her cheerful chatter about the weather, a bizarre counterpoint to the storm raging inside me. She took my vitals, inserted an IV into the back of my hand, and had me change into a thin, paper-like gown. Each step was a move deeper into enemy territory, a step from which it felt harder to retreat. I knew logically that Mr. Chen's team and the police were here. He had told me they would be disguised as hospital staff, orderlies, visitors. But I could not see them. I felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. My only defense was the mask of the frail, slightly confused woman I had perfected over the past few weeks. The most difficult moment came just before they were ready to wheel me away. A nurse announced that my son wanted to see me before the procedure. They brought Julian in on a gurney, his face pale and his eyes hazy from the pre-op sedatives they had already given him. Serena walked beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, the very picture of the devoted wife. "Mom," Julian whispered, his voice slurred as he reached for my hand. "Thank you. For everything. I love you." Tears streamed down my face, hot and real. This was not part of the performance. The love I felt for my son, the boy he was beneath the poison and the manipulation, was a profound, aching truth. "I love you too, my darling," I choked out, squeezing his hand. "More than you will ever know." Serena looked on, her face a perfect mask of sorrowful empathy. "It is time, Julian," she said softly, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "You both need to rest now." As the nurses began to wheel him away toward his own operating room, I watched him go, my heart breaking. This was the moment of maximum danger. I was about to be taken behind the closed doors of an operating theater. If something went wrong now, if the plan failed, no one could save me. Parallel action at the house. While I was being prepped for surgery, the catalyst for the story's end was about to be set in motion. Back at the house, Noah had been left in the care of a new babysitter Serena had hired, a woman who was, in fact, one of Serena's accomplices, tasked with keeping him contained and away from the hospital. But Noah, with a child's unerring instinct, knew something was wrong. He had seen the way his grandmother looked at him before she left, a look of desperate, secret meaning he could not decipher, but could feel in his bones. He knew his father was getting sicker, not better, despite the special medicine Serena gave him. Driven by a fear he could not name, he did something he had never done before. He disobeyed. While the babysitter was distracted by a phone call, he slipped into Serena's home office, the room he was strictly forbidden from entering. He did not know what he was looking for, but he felt an urgent need to find something. His eyes scanned the desk. It was neat, orderly, but on a side table, next to a stack of medical journals, was the bottle of dark, bitter-smelling liquid Serena used for the tea, and next to it, a book left open. Serena, in her arrogance and haste that morning, had become careless. The book was a toxicology manual, and the page it was open to was titled Aconitum, the Queen of Poisons. Noah could not read all the scientific terms, but he could read the bolded words. Symptoms include nausea, abdominal pain, and paresthesia. Large doses result in cardiac arrhythmia and death. Mimics the effects of fulminant renal failure. And at the bottom of the page was a hand-drawn diagram of the wolfsbane plant, a flower he recognized from one of his grandma's old botany books. He did not understand everything, but he understood the most important word on the page: poison. The bitter tea was poison. His mother, his new mother, was poisoning his father, and his grandma was at the hospital, giving his dad a kidney he did not need. He had to warn her. He ran from the room, but the babysitter caught him in the hallway. "Where do you think you are going?" she demanded, her voice suddenly cold and hard. But Noah, fueled by a terror that was stronger than she was, bit her hand with all his might. As she yelped and recoiled, he scrambled for the front door, wrenched it open, and ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life, a small boy on a desperate, impossible mission. 7:55 a.m., 8 a.m. They were wheeling my gurney down the quiet, sterile corridor toward the large double doors of the operating theater. The anesthesiologist was walking beside me, a kind-looking man who was, I prayed, one of Mr. Chen's team. He was talking to me in a low, soothing voice, explaining the procedure. This was it, the point of no return. "Clara, I'm just going to administer the first sedative now to help you relax," he began, but he was cut off. From the far end of the hallway, a commotion erupted. Shouts, the sound of running feet, and then a single high-pitched voice screaming a name. "Grandma! Grandma!" The anesthesiologist stopped. The nurses pushing my gurney froze. I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my heart exploding in my chest. The double doors at the end of the hall burst open, and there was Noah, my Noah, his face streaked with tears, his chest heaving, a security guard in close pursuit. He ran toward me, a small, desperate meteor of love and terror. Serena, who had been in the surgical waiting area, appeared in a doorway, her face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into pure, murderous rage as she saw him. Noah reached my gurney, grabbing onto the rail, his small body trembling, and he shouted the words the entire world had been waiting to hear, the words that would blow Serena's universe apart. Grandma, don't do this! My dad has been poisoned! Mommy Serena did it! It's the tea. The hallway erupted into controlled, pre-planned chaos. The anesthesiologist spoke calmly into a device on his wrist. The package has been delivered. All units converge. Suddenly, the hospital corridor was filled with people who were not who they had seemed. The kindly-looking visitor down the hall, the quiet orderly, the janitor mopping the floor. They were all plainclothes police officers, and they were all moving towards Serena. She saw them coming. She looked from their advancing forms to Noah clinging to my gurney, to me, my face no longer vacant but filled with a cold, hard clarity. And she understood. It was a trap. Mr. Chen appeared, as if from nowhere, and stood before her, blocking her path. "It is over, Serena," he said, his voice calm and final. "We know everything." He gestured to Noah. "Your stepson just found the aconite you have been using to poison your husband." Serena's composure, her lifelong shield, shattered into a million pieces. "You!" she shrieked at me, her voice a raw, ugly sound of pure hatred. "You did this." "No," a lead detective said, stepping forward. "You did this, Serena. Or should we say Catherine Finch or Eliza Thorne? We know about Mr. Patterson in Ohio. We know about the Millers in Florida. The pattern of greed and death ends today." The full, horrifying scope of her past was laid bare in the cold, fluorescent light of the hospital corridor. She was a monster, a black widow who had left a trail of bodies in her wake. As the officers reached for her, she made one last desperate, feral lunge. Not at me, at Noah. But she never got close. A female officer tackled her, bringing her to the ground with a hard, unceremonious thud. The last thing I saw as they wheeled me away, not to surgery, but to a recovery room, was Serena being pulled to her feet, her beautiful face a contorted mask of pure, defeated evil. Simultaneously, a medical team was rushing down the opposite hall toward Julian's room, a crash cart with them, shouting orders about toxicology and emergency protocols. I looked at my brave, terrified, magnificent grandson, whose love had been a light strong enough to cut through the darkest lie. The immediate danger was over. But in the ruins of Serena's evil, a new, uncertain day was just beginning. The chaos of the hospital corridor was a blur of controlled urgency. As Serena was led away in handcuffs, a venomous, snarling creature stripped of all her elegant artifice, a different kind of team swarmed around my son. The code blue that had been called was not for a cardiac arrest, but for a poisoning. Julian was rushed to the intensive care unit, a place I knew all too well from my years as a nurse. I was taken to a quiet recovery room, where the world slowly began to come back into focus. Noah, my brave, terrified grandson, was brought to me. He clung to me, his small body trembling, and I held him, stroking his hair, my own tears finally beginning to fall, not tears of fear, but of profound, shuddering relief. My sister Carol arrived a few hours later, her flight from the East Coast a frantic, overnight journey. Her presence, solid and unwavering, was an anchor in the storm. Mr. Chen and the police were kind, but their questions were relentless. I recounted everything, my mind now a clear, cold archive of the past year's events. Noah, with the help of a gentle child psychologist, gave his own statement, his story of the bitter tea, and the toxicology book providing the final, crucial pieces of the puzzle. For 24 hours, Julian's life hung in the balance. The doctors, armed with the knowledge that they were fighting aconite poisoning, worked feverishly to flush the toxins from his system. It was a delicate, dangerous process. I sat in the waiting room with Carol and Noah, the three of us a small, silent island of hope in a sea of clinical uncertainty. We were no longer just a family, we were a rescue mission. The first, most critical phase was to save his body. The second, I knew, would be to save his soul. Julian survived. He woke up 2 days later. The poison purged from his system, but his body weak and ravaged. The first person he asked for was not me. It was Noah. I brought my grandson into the room, and Julian, his eyes filled with a bottomless, agonizing shame, wept. He apologized to his son for not being strong enough, for not protecting him, for believing a lie. Noah, with the pure, uncomplicated grace of a child, simply hugged his father. My own conversation with him came later that day. I walked into his room alone, and the weight of his betrayal and his own self-loathing was a palpable presence. "Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "there are no words. I am so sorry. I was a fool. I let her. I almost let her kill you. I almost let her kill me. I was a willing accomplice to the destruction of our own family." I looked at my son, a man hollowed out by the truth, and I felt not the warmth of forgiveness, but the cold, desolate landscape of what had been lost. "Yes, you were," I said, my voice not cruel, but factual. "She could not have done any of this without your help, Julian. You chose her lies over my truth. You chose her comfort over your own son's well-being. That is a fact you will have to live with for the rest of your life." "I know," he choked out, tears streaming down his face. "How can you ever forgive me?" "I do not know," I answered, and it was the most honest thing I had ever said. Forgiveness is a distant shore, and right now, we are still lost at sea. Our only job for now is to navigate toward a safe harbor for Noah. Everything else will have to wait. I could not offer him absolution. He would have to find that on his own. Our relationship, once the central pillar of my life, was now a ruin, and I did not know if it could ever be rebuilt. Serena's trial was a media sensation, a lurid spectacle that played out on the national news. The case of the Black Widow of Silicon Valley, as the press dubbed her, was a chilling tale of greed, manipulation, and cold-blooded murder. The evidence against her was an avalanche. My secret recordings were the centerpiece. The jury listened in horrified silence to Serena's cool, clinical voice as she planned my son's death with her accomplice. The financial documents, the evidence from her briefcase detailing her past crimes, and the toxicology reports all painted an undeniable picture of a serial predator. The families of her previous victims, the Pattersons from Ohio, the Millers from Florida, were there. Their presence a somber Greek chorus testifying to her long history of evil. Julian, as the prosecution's star witness, delivered a devastating, heartbreaking account of her manipulation. His testimony was an act of profound public penance, the first step on his long road back to integrity. Serena was defiant to the end, her defense a pathetic attempt to paint herself as the victim of a conspiracy. But 12 jurors and the rest of the world saw her for exactly what she was. The verdict was swift and unanimous: guilty, on all counts of attempted murder, fraud, and, in the reopened cases, first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to multiple consecutive life sentences, ensuring she would die in prison. As they led her away, her mask of composure finally crumbled, and she screamed my name, a raw, ugly sound of pure, impotent rage. I felt nothing but the quiet, profound relief of a story finally reaching its just and proper end. In the aftermath of the trial, we were left to rebuild. The beautiful house in the hills, once my sanctuary, was now a place of tainted memories. It was sold, and its contents, the beautiful art, the cold furniture, every trace of Serena, were liquidated. Julian's recovery was slow and arduous. He entered intense therapy to deal with the trauma and his own crushing guilt. He was a man who had to relearn who he was, without the crutch of a dominant partner and with the full, horrifying knowledge of his own weakness. Our family also needed to be redefined. One evening, Julian came to me with a set of legal papers. "I have been thinking a lot," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "about what it means to be a parent, and I know that for the past few years, I failed at that job. You were the one who was Noah's true parent. You were the one who protected him." He pushed the papers across the table. "I want you to be his legal guardian with me. I want to formally and legally make you his co-parent. It is the right thing to do. He needs you, and I need you." It was a profound admission of his failure, but also a testament to his commitment to rebuilding. We became, in the eyes of the law and in the truth of our hearts, a new kind of family unit, one forged in trauma, but bound by a fierce, protective love for the boy at the center of our world. The years that followed were a quiet, slow journey toward a new kind of peace, We bought a new home, a modest, light-filled house with a large garden, a place with no ghosts and no echoes of the past. I found a new purpose. Working with Mr. Chen, I used a portion of the recovered assets to establish a small foundation in my late husband's name. The Henry Mayfield Project provides pro bono legal and psychological support to victims of elder abuse and intimate partner financial fraud. I found that in sharing my story, in using my experience as a cautionary tale and a source of strength for others, I could transmute my pain into something useful and good. The archivist in me was now curating stories of survival. Julian found his way back to. He left the world of academia and became a high school history teacher, finding more satisfaction in shaping young minds than in the publish or perish world of university life. He became an active, present, and humble father to Noah. Our relationship was not the same as it had been. The old, easy intimacy was gone, replaced by something more cautious, more honest, and ultimately more real. He was no longer just my son. He was a man I was slowly, carefully learning to respect again. I am sitting in my new garden. It is a peaceful Sunday morning. Noah, now a thoughtful and kind teenager, is helping me prune the roses. The sun is warm on my face, and the air is sweet with the scent of jasmine. It is a life I never could have imagined, born from the ashes of a nightmare. I think about the nature of love and the nature of poison. Some toxins are swift, but others, like the one Serena administered, are slow, creeping things that mimic natural illness, making you doubt your own perceptions. Betrayal is a poison of the soul, and its symptoms are confusion, doubt, and despair. The antidote, I have learned, is the cold, hard, and often painful truth. My unconditional love for my son had been a vulnerability, an open gate through which the enemy had marched. I have learned that true, lasting love is not a blind, defenseless thing. It is a tended garden. It requires vigilance. It requires the wisdom to know the difference between a flower and a weed. And sometimes it requires the strength to prune away the parts that are diseased, to cut out the poison, so that what remains can have a chance to heal and grow toward the light. My family is smaller now and scarred, but the roots are strong, and we are finally in bloom.